Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to be making this beautiful bustier gather dress that have a basque waistline. So if this sounds like what you would like to learn, then definitely keep watching. So to get started, I've already marked out my basic lines. I've marked my shoulder to my bust line, my shoulder to my under bust, then my shoulder to my waist. In front I have 17 inches, and then my shoulder to my hip line. Then I added extra 2.5 inches for the basque effect we are going to be having at the lower part, so take note of that. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. I'm going to mark that on the bust line, the waistline, and all the way down to the hemline. So I'll go ahead now and connect my points. So for my dart intake, I'm going to be marking 2 inches. Your dart intake should be determined by how busty you are. So for me, I'm working with a bust of 40 inches. So I'm going to be taking half an inch on this side and then 1.5 inches on this side. But if your bust is less than 40 inches, you can take 1¼ inch at this side. So I'm also going to mark the same thing on the under bust all the way down to the hemline. So now that I've done that, I'm going to connect to this point. So the next thing I'm going to do is to come down from the bust point by half an inch. And then I'll use my curve ruler to connect to the half an inch I came down with. So make sure you place your ruler properly before going ahead to connect your points. Then I'm also going to connect these points. So for my off shoulder, I'm going to come down by 6.5 inches. You can determine how off you want your off shoulder to be. But for me, I want mine to be 6.5 inches. So I marked 6.5 inches here. And then I'm going to draw a straight line across. So I'm going to be extending this dart line to this point. So for my dart intake, I'm going to mark half an inch at this point, and then 1 inch, and then 1 inch at this point. And so from the bust point, I'm going to come up by 3/4 inch. And then I'm going to connect from this half inch to this point, and then from here to this point. So I'll go ahead and blend it out. So for my neckline, I'm going to come up by 1.5 inches, because if you look at it, you will see that it has a V shape at the top part. So I'll come up by 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to connect to this point. But before I do that, I'll first of all measure my dart here. And then also measure my dart here. Just make sure that both dart lines are equal, so that by the time you're joining it together, one side will not be longer than one side. So before I connect it to the armhole line, I'm going to first of all mark my bust circumference divided by 4. Then I'll go ahead to connect my points. So what I will do now is that I'm going to measure what I have here as my dart intake, and then I will mark it here and add my sewing allowance. Then on the waistline, I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4. Then I will measure what I have here as my dart intake, and then replace it here plus my sewing allowance. So on the hip line, I'm going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4. Then I will measure what I have here as my dart, then add my sewing allowance. So I'll connect all these points I marked together. For my bust dart, I'm going to come down by 2 inches, which is the difference I have between my shoulder to my waist at the back to my shoulder to my waist at the front. So mine is 2 inches. So go ahead and take your own measurement, and whatever you have as a difference, that's what you're going to be marking here. And then I'll go ahead to connect it to the bust point. I'm going to fold in my bust darts just to align the side seams. So for the basque waistline, I'm going to come up from the hemline by 4 inches, and then I will connect it to the center front. So before I connect it to the center front, I'm going to first of all fold in my darts so that by the time I'm joining them together, one side will not be longer than one side. So make sure you fold in your darts. And cut out my front pattern. I'll set it aside and cut out my back piece. So I've gone ahead to mark my basic lines. I've added 1 inch for my zipper allowance. Then my chest line, this is my shoulder to my chest line. Then my shoulder to my waistline. At the back I have 15 inches. Then my hip line plus 2 inches, just like I did for the front piece. So for my back piece, I didn't mark my bust line because I like extending my dart to the chest line. So I'm going ahead now to mark my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. I'll mark that on the waistline, then on the hemline. So I'll go ahead and connect my points. So for my dart intake, I'm going to be marking a 1/4 inch. You can go with a 1/2 inch, but I like making use of a 1/4 inch. I'll do the same on the hemline. And I'm going to extend it to this chest line. So on the chest line, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4 plus my sewing allowance. Then on the waistline, I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4 plus my dart intake and 1 inch for my sewing allowance. Then on the hemline, I'm going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4. I added extra paper because mine was not wide enough, so I added an extra paper at this point. That's why you can see it this way. So on the hip line, I'm going to mark the hip circumference divided by 4 plus my dart intake and then my sewing allowance. So I'll go ahead and connect my points. So for my back neckline, I'm going to come down from the chest line by a 1/4 inch. And then I will connect it to this point. So for my zipper bulge, I'm going to come in by 1/2 inch. Then slant it this way. So for the basque effect, I'm going to place my pattern paper just like this. And if all your measurements are correct, they both should align at the waistline and then at the chest line, just like this. So I'm going to mark this point and then I'll connect it to the center back. So I'm not going to be making use of this. I'm going to be making use of this. So now that I've done that, I'll go ahead and cut out my pattern. So I'm going to fold in my darts because I want to cut it as a dartless piece. But if you want to sew in your darts, then you could just leave it that way. And when you cut it out on your fabric, then you can go ahead to take in your darts. So I'm going to go ahead now and cut out both my front piece and my back piece. So this is it. I've done that. I added 1/2 inch for my joining allowance. I already add my sewing allowance. So it's only joining allowance that I added. So this is my lining. I've gone ahead to cut it out, and I've also ironed my hairstay to it. And for my main fabric, I ironed my hairstay and also I cut out my wording. This is actually optional. If you don't want, you could still leave it that way and just work with your hairstay. So I'm going to pin down my front piece together. Then I'll go ahead to take it to my sewing machine to stitch it down. So for my lining piece, I'm also going to do the same. I'll also join them together, then also take it to my sewing machine to stitch it down. So now that I've done that, this is what I have. So I'll go ahead now and use my pressing iron to iron all my seams flat. And when ironing around your bust area, make sure you use your tailor's arm so that your bustier can come out perfectly. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to attach my strap. And I've already gone ahead to cut it out and also stitch it down. And this is it. I have about 6 pieces and the width is 2 inches on a fold. You can make yours 4 inches. The reason I ended up with 2 inches is because I do not have enough fabric, which I really didn't like that much. So try and make yours 4 inches on a fold. So I'll go ahead now and place the first two, which I'm going to be tying around my neckline. I'm going to place it on my dart line. So this part of my strap that is still open is what I'm going to be placing on my dart line. And for the one that is going to be sitting around the armhole, I marked 2 inches from this point. Then I placed the second strap. And I'll also be doing the same thing for the other side. So for the back piece, I'm also going to be attaching my strap. So I measured from the side where I placed it on the front piece. And what I have here is about 6.5 inches. So I'm going to mark from the side 6.5 inches. And after that, I'll go ahead to pin down my strap. I'll also do the same thing for the other side. So after pinning it down, the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to join the front and the back together. So I'm going to pin them down at the side seam. And after that, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine to stitch it down using my joining allowance. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm also going to do the same thing for my lining. I'm also going to pin the front piece and the back piece together. Then go ahead to join in with my joining allowance. So after that, I'm going to show you what next to do. And this is what I have after doing that. So at this point, I went ahead to take my measurements, both on the hip line, the waistline, and then at the top part, just to be sure that everything is perfectly okay. So I'll go ahead now and place my lining piece together with my main fabric. Then I'll pin it down all around. So at this point, I noticed that my center front was a little bit too high. So when you are drafting your pattern, just go up by just 1 inch. So I came down by 1/2 inch. And after pinning it down, I'm going to stitch from the neckline down to the side seam, and then I'm going to flip it to the right side from the lower part. And when I was done with that, this is what I have. And I've also gone ahead to make a basic stitch at the lower part just to keep it in place. And this is the wrong side. You can see how neat it is. So the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to measure what I have at the lower part. And whatever I have, I'm going to multiply it by 2.5 inches. But if you want yours to be full, just depend on how much gathers you want. If you want it to be full, you can make it 3 inches. But I want mine not to be too full, so I multiply it by 2.5 inches. So I've gone ahead to cut out my fabric. And for the length, you can determine how long you want your dress to be. And also take into consideration that you're also going to be trimming down the lower part so that all sides will be equal. So I'll go ahead and take it to my sewing machine now and gather it to my measurements. And when I was done with that, this is what I have. So I'm going to flip it right sides together, then go ahead to attach my zip. And for my zip, I'm going to be stopping around 22 inches. So I'm going to mark the point where I have my 22 inches. And then I will attach my zipper to that point before going ahead to stitch down from that point also down to the lower part. And when I'm done with that, I'll go ahead to trim down the lower part so that all sides will be equal before going ahead to hem it. And that is it, guys. I'm going to put it on my mannequin for you guys to see. So this is it. You can see how beautiful this looks. So guys, if you find this video very useful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, put on your post notification bell so that whenever there is a new video up on my channel, you will be notified. So until then, stay blessed.